Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. We are, believe it or not, on episode 19 of Saved You a Seat. And today we are going to talk about SoftPro Standard tips and tricks. Today we also have a trainer with us from SoftPro, Jessica. She's done one for us before. She's amazing. She's going to take you through some cool stuff with SoftPro Standard. But before I hand it off to her, I just want to remind everybody that we do record these and we do send a follow-up email, and we will send it out in the next couple days with a link so you can listen to the recording or share it with people in your office. If you have any questions, if you want to go ahead and type them in the question box throughout the webinar, I'll be trying to get it through as many as we can. If by chance we don't get to your question, we will certainly try and include it as part of our follow-up or point you in the right direction to somebody who can. So feel free to type in your questions. We'll monitor them throughout. And with that, I think I'm going to hand it over to Jessica. Thank you so much for doing this for us again. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Leslie. Hi, everyone. Oh, sorry, I think I was muted. Hi, guys. This is Jessica with SoftPro, and I'm going to be your trainer today for the Saved You a Seat SoftPro Standard tips and tricks. So these tips and tricks we're going to talk about are going to apply to any of you in Standard and also any of you using Enterprise. So if there's anything that we can't do in one version or the other, I will definitely point it out. But I think besides one little thing that I'm going to talk about that only applies to Standard, pretty much everything is going to apply to both Standard and Enterprise. So I'm going to start out first with our keyboard shortcuts. One of the things I like best about new things that I learn about using Proform is something that's going to make my life easier, something that's going to help me move quicker throughout my file. And keyboard shortcuts are definitely a way that you can easily do that. So there are going to be some keyboard shortcuts that I think everyone should know. They are really important and they are really, really helpful. So that first keyboard shortcut everybody should be aware of is your F1 function key. Whenever you hit your F1 function key, it's going to launch the SoftPro Help website.
Hey, sorry, Jessica, can I interrupt you for 1 second?
Sure.
That opening splash screen is all we see.
Sorry. Good thing I didn't move anywhere yet. Okay. Sorry, guys. All right, so when I hit my F1 function key, it's going to go ahead and launch the SoftPro Help website. One of the great things about using that F1 function key rather than going to your help menu is if you're on a specific screen within the Proform file, it will actually take you right to that spot on the website. So if you're looking for a specific answer or more information about a field on a certain screen or just that screen in general, hitting that F1 function key is a great way to get to the help website and get right to the topic that you are looking to get more information on. Of course, you can always search the website. If you click on that search icon in the top blue bar, you can search the website for any information that you're looking to get about SoftPro. Also, if you come to the home page, which you can get to with that home link, you're going to find links to training videos that we have posted, links to frequently asked questions, and also handouts. So the handouts are going to be in the job aid section. These are going to be documents that you can print out that are going to walk you through step by step how to do certain things within Proform. So there's a lot of good information out here on the website. Anytime you want to reference it, always remember that you can just hit that F1 function key. So the next keyboard shortcut that everyone should know, I'm going to stick with those function keys, is the F2 function key. F2 is the way that you're going to clear out all characters from any field. It's going to be much easier and quicker than your delete button or your backspace button. If you want to clear something out of a field, start over and retype something. It's also going to be crucial to converting or reverting a field from red text back to the black text. So for example, if I come into my settlement date screen, when I type in my settlement date, it's going to auto-populate my disbursement date, proration date, and recording date automatically in the file. Those two pieces of information are in different color text. The settlement date that we manually enter is in red text. The disbursement, proration, and recording dates are all in black text. Red text equals user enter text. User text is not linked to anything else. It's never going to automatically change whenever you see red text. However, black text is going to be system generated. That text automatically goes into the applicable field based on something else within the Proform file. So your black system generated text will automatically update. It does not mean that you can't change it manually. So if I'm closing today on the 15th, but the closing's happening late today and I'm not going to actually disperse until tomorrow, I can always change my disbursement date to the 16th. Notice that when I change that disbursement date to the 16th, it changes to red text. So that field is no longer system generated text, it's user text. User text doesn't automatically update. Maybe closing gets delayed for a few days. So if I change my settlement date, let's say to Friday the 18th, I would need or expect my disbursement date to change as well. And you can see that it stays static there at the 16th. So the way that I can revert that field back to the system generated text so that it will automatically update based on my new settlement date, I'm going to use the F2 function key. Delete may not necessarily work. Backspace may not necessarily work. You want to make sure to use that F2 function key. It's going to clear out all of your manual characters, all of your red text, and then when you tab or click out, it goes back to the system generated and automatically updates with the new information. So anytime you want to clear out a field and revert it back to whatever was there that the system generated, you always want to make sure to use that F2 function key. Another function key that hopefully we're all aware of is going to be our F9 function key. So those of us that are used to using our lookup tables throughout the Proform file, we know that the F9 function key is the way that we can open up any of those lookup tables. You have several different tables throughout the Proform file that you can use to store information that you're going to be using on a consistent basis. So if, for example, we think about our contacts, we can store our lender contacts, our real estate agents, mortgage brokers, attorneys. Those can all be saved into their individual lookup tables. We also have some lookup tables throughout the Proform file that may not be as obvious. So for example, when I come to my property screen, did we know that there was a lookup table there in your county name field? So how did I know that there was a lookup table behind that field? The reason I know there's a lookup table there is if I put my cursor into that field and look down to my status bar. The status bar is that white gray colored bar at the bottom of your screen. If you look over to the right-hand side, you're going to see some coding. Anytime you have your cursor in any field and you look down to that status bar and you see the LKUP code, that is telling you that there is a lookup table that lives within that field. If you want to open it up to access it, you're going to hit that F9 function key. So if you're ever unsure or ever curious to see if a lookup table exists in a place you maybe didn't expect it or maybe didn't realize was there, always know that you can put your cursor in that field. You can look down to that status bar and you can see that LKUP code, and then you know there's a lookup table there. So F9 is going to work to open those up. For anyone that doesn't use function keys on their keyboard, you can also use Control L. Control L will also open up your lookup table. So when I take a look at any of my scrollable fields, so sticking here with the property screen, my full legal description field is what we call a scrollable field, which means it's very large. I have a lot of space to type a very long legal description if I need to. Scrollable fields can always be expanded. To expand any of your scrollable fields, you'll know a field is scrollable because you'll see a scroll bar on the right-hand side. You can expand that by hitting the keyboard shortcut of Control Z as in zebra. So when I hit Control Z in that scrollable field, it opens up this scrollable field editor. This gives me a much larger view of that field. If you're typing or reviewing something that is pretty long, it definitely helps to give you a much bigger space to see that text. Also, when we open up the scrollable field editor, you'll note that there is a check spelling button. So this will, when we click on it, run a spell check of the entire field. Scrollable fields are not the only ones that we can run spell checks in. You can actually run a spell check in any field throughout your Proform file. The way that we're going to run a spell check is again with one of those keyboard shortcuts. So in any field that you want to run a spell check for, you're going to put your cursor there and then you can hit the F7 function key. So F7 will run a spell check of any field, whether it's scrollable or not, throughout your Proform file. So that's another great keyboard shortcut to quickly hit and run a spell check of any field that you're typing in. Another keyboard shortcut that I really love is the keyboard shortcut for my dates. So this is going to work in both Proform and in ProTrust. Anytime you're in a date field, let's go back to that settlement dates field. If I want to put in today's date in any of my date fields, if you just hit Control D, it's going to automatically put in whatever today's date is. So that's really nice, especially when you're in ProTrust and you're creating checks and deposits and wires and things like that. If you know you're sending those wires out or receiving that money in today, you can just quickly hit that Control D and it'll put in today's date for you much quicker than you having to type it out yourself. All right, so speaking of ProTrust, let's go ahead and talk about some funding tips, things that are going to help us as we need to fund and disperse our loan. So starting here with the CDF, I'm going to go into the CDF tab, and I want everyone to know that you have these two screens called Flex Checks. Those of us that use Enterprise may be a little bit more familiar with Flex Checks than those of us that use Standard. Flex Checks is a way for us to make edits to our disbursements. Those of us that use Enterprise know that we disperse right in the Proform file. So the way that we can change our disbursements in terms of dollar amounts and payees, we have to use Flex Checks to do that. So those of us in Standard know that we export into ProTrust. Once you get to ProTrust, you're kind of free to change whatever you need without affecting your Proform file. However, if you want to work in the Proform file to set some things up, just to make your life easier when you get to ProTrust, make that disbursement process much quicker, you can also use Flex Checks. So it doesn't matter whether you're in Standard or Enterprise, those checks are going to work the same way. So let's go to CDF page 2. What if I need to combine several disbursements together into one check? So let's think about our real estate agents. I'm going to scroll down to section H, and I have my commission amount going to my listing agent, Classic Urban Realty, and then they also have one of those admin fees. So normally the way I add this to the CD, it's going to generate two separate checks that I can print. So I would need to do one for that admin fee and one for the commission. But if the agent is adamant about getting one check for both the commission and the admin fee, even though they're separately listed on the CD, they only want one check. You can combine those using your Flex Check options. So to assign a Flex Check, we're going to change our disbursement status code. If I want to combine these two disbursements together, I'm going to give them the exact same Flex Check number. So you have 25 different Flex Checks that you can use. I'm going to go ahead and just pick Flex Check number 1 since it's the first one we're doing. So I'm going to assign the admin fee to Flex Check 1, and I'm also going to assign their commission amount to Flex Check number 1. So to see that check as it's been created, I can close CDF page 2, and then I can open up my first Flex Check screen. There on Flex Check number 1 is my combined commission and admin fee. From your Flex Check screen, you can change your payee. You can adjust your dollar amount if needed. Changing anything here on Flex Checks doesn't affect the CD. So this is also a great way if post-closing there's a disbursement that you need to edit in terms of who it's going to be paid to or what dollar amount's going to be paid to that vendor or that payee. Flex Checks is a great way to make those changes in the Proform file without affecting the CD as it was on the day of closing, as it was approved by your lender, as it was signed by your borrower. So you can send one disbursement to a Flex Check line, you could send multiple. It's a great way to combine or a great way to make edits separate from the CD. So we can also edit dollar amounts. Let's think about a big disbursement that we want to break down into several different disbursements. So let's think about our check to us, the settlement agent check for the money we made at closing, so for our revenue. You also have a screen under your CDF and your HUD tabs, by the way. So this Flex Checks and group disbursements is going to work both in HUD and CD the same way. So either in your CDF tab or your HUD tab, you also have a screen called Group Disbursements. It's right above those Flex Check screens. Your group disbursement screen will show you all of the disbursements that you group together on that CDF or HUD by disbursement status code. So for example, my settlement agent check. I have several different fees that are being paid to me. I also have my title insurance premiums, my portion of the premium that's coming to me. All of that is getting lumped together in one disbursement. So if I want to take that group disbursement and edit that, I can come to the group disbursement screen and send it to a Flex Check line. So you can see that I've already sent this over to flex check number 2. I'm going to move it down one line just to give us a little bit more breathing room there in our flex check screen. So let me go back down to the flex checks, and we'll see that on line 3, we have that group disbursement payable to the settlement agent. So maybe some of that money needs to go in one account and then some of it needs to go into another account. So we have our revenue account where most of it's going to go, but then maybe we also have like an operating account that we use to pay some upfront costs that we ultimately then collect at the closing. So if I need to replenish that operating account, I need to take some of the money out of that $1,500 check. I can do that here in my flex check screen. So you do have a plus minus field that you can use to adjust the dollar amount. So let's say I need to take out $500 from there. So I'm going to do minus 500. What that will do is it will reduce my group disbursement to the settlement agent by $500. So the original was $1,523.75. The new disbursement amount is $1,023.75. Also, right now, if I look down to my file balance, you can see that I have a balance of $500. Remember, we can always see that balance down in our status bar. So at this point, I have $500 to play with. I can now create as many different disbursements as I need, as long as I don't go over that $500. So I can come down to flex check line 4, and I'm going to do another separate check, and I'm going to make it payable to my operating accounts. And I'm going to make that, we'll say it's my operating funds, and I'm going to make that in the amount of $500. Now, I just created one big lump sum $500 check, but of course, if you needed several different checks, maybe, only $250 of that needed to go into the operating account, the other $250, went somewhere else. So you can split that $500, whatever you take out of that disbursement, you can split it into as many different checks and disbursements that you need. So flex checks is a really great tool to, especially if you're in enterprise, how you're going to change your disbursements outside of your register, because we know that when we get in the register, it's secure receiving and dispersing. You can't make any changes directly in the register. So we have to use flex checks for that. But even for those of us in standard that are exporting into ProTrust, yes, of course, I could have done this when I got to ProTrust, but why not set it up here in the Proform file? If I already know in advance of exporting that I'm going to need to do this, you can have it set up this way in your Proform files. You can have it set up in a template even, if there's something that you're always going to be splitting from, for example, your settlement agent check. So it's a great way to get that Proform file set up just to make your disbursement process easier. All right, so speaking of standard, I'm going to flip over to my standard version. So right now I was working in enterprise, but there are a couple other cool tools that we can use in our standard edition before we export to ProTrust. That's, again, just going to help us set up that disbursement process, make things a little bit easier. And it's going to be those disbursement status codes. So we know that when we're building our CD or when we're building our HUD, those disbursement status codes dictate exactly how our disbursements are created. Everything that gets marked with the same code gets grouped in the same disbursement. We can also use those disbursement status codes to set up what our transaction is going to go into ProTrust as. So for example, on page 3 of my CD, I have my mortgage payoffs entered. If my office policy is that we never cut checks to any of our payoff lenders, we always send the payoff amounts out via wire. When I add this amount to my CD, I know for a fact that there's no way I'm ever going to cut a check for that. Once I get into ProTrust, I'm going to have to change that transaction type to my outgoing wire or my miscellaneous transaction. So the reason it goes into ProTrust onto your ledger as a pending check is because by default, the disbursement status code that gets put in is that letter S. S stands for separate check. So anything you mark with a letter S, when you export it to ProTrust, it will be a pending check. If you go down to the bottom of your disbursement status code list, you have ProTrust options. If I know for a fact that I'm going to wire this money out, then I can mark it, instead of with that S for separate check, with the W for wire out. So when I export into ProTrust, it's not going to be on my ledger as a pending check. It's going to be already posted as an outgoing wire. So it saves me that extra step of having to change that transaction type once I get into ProTrust. The other options you have in terms of your ProTrust disbursement status codes, if you know that you're going to be holding on to something. So maybe there's some funds that I collected that need to be held in escrow. Maybe we're waiting on the tax bill to come in and we're going to hold that money to pay those taxes. So you can mark that disbursement with that letter H. When you export to ProTrust, it will then show as a held check rather than a pending check that you can accidentally print. So I'll go ahead and put this other payoff here on hold. Another thing that we can set up to automatically happen is the transfer of funds. So anytime you're going to be transferring funds from one ledger to another, you can have that set up here in Proform so that it automatically happens when you get to ProTrust. So let's go back down to that group disbursement screen and let's think about the remittance fees to our underwriter. One thing that we can do in ProTrust is we can create what's called a fee ledger for one particular vendor that you're going to be paying on a regular basis. So I'm going to use the underwriter as the example. If I need to do a monthly remittance report to my underwriter and then remit to them once a month all of the remittance fees I've collected throughout the month, normally I'd have to cut a check out of every single file that closed that month and send this big stack of checks to that underwriter. Instead, what I can do to save myself on check stock, especially, is I can do a funds transfer. So I can set up a fee ledger specifically for that underwriter. Out of every individual file I close, I can then transfer those funds to that underwriter's ledger, hold them there until the end of the month when I'm ready to remit. So once I'm then ready to remit, I just go to that underwriter's ledger and I cut one check for all my fees over the last month. So a lot of our customers use these fee ledgers for underwriter remittance fees. You can use them for e-recording fees. You can use them for maybe a title searcher that you pay often. Anybody you can think of that you pay on a regular basis, you can create a ledger for. Maybe it's FedEx or UPS, paying your invoices for that. So anything that you can think of, you can set up a fee ledger for. So if I know that I'm going to definitely transfer my underwriter remittance fees once I get into ProTrust, what I can do is I can come to my group disbursement screen, and for my underwriter disbursement, I'm going to change that to an automatic funds transfer. So one last thing I'll show you before I'll do my export, because I do want to show you guys how this will look when you set this all up and then you do your export. If I come to my general tab, note that your loan funding screen also is called ProTrust. So there are some ProTrust options there. One of the options that I love to have turned on is my separate ProTrust deposit. So normally when we do our export from Proform to ProTrust, by default, that checkbox is unchecked. What you see when you get to your ProTrust ledger is that Proform generated incoming fund deposit for all the money you're expecting to receive in order to balance. We take that initial deposit that gets created, and then we should always be breaking it down to how we actually receive the money. Who did we get it from? What dollar amount did we get it in? What day did we receive the money on? One way to save yourself at least one extra step is to choose to separate the ProTrust deposit. When I turn that option on, what will happen after I export is that I will see now two deposits automatically created. One for the amount specifically of my loan funding. So whatever loan funding amount you have in your file, you'll see a deposit automatically created for that amount. Then you'll see that Proform generated generic deposit for everything else you expect to receive. So it kind of saves you on one step of having to break that deposit down, 2-3 times. Maybe we only have to do it once, or maybe we don't have to do it at all because maybe all we got was loan funding and funds from the buyer. So there you go, there's your two deposits. So it really helps the disbursement process go a lot quicker. So I'm going to go ahead and do an export. We're going to do File, and then we'll choose Export and Export to ProTrust. So you guys can see what looks different after setting those options up here in Proform. So right off the bat, I see my funds transfer pop up. So it's asking me, where do you want to send these funds to? I've told the ledger that I'm going to transfer them. All it needs to know is where. So I have a ledger I called U/W, and that's where I send my underwriter remittance fees. So I'm going to type in that ledger ID, and I'm going to click OK. And I'm going to save the export, and I'm not going to exit. So our deposit transactions. So we've got funds specifically coming from our lender. That's going to be our loan funding amount. And then I have the pro form generated incoming funds. So you can see how 2 deposit transactions automatically get created instead of that big one lump sum deposit. The check that we decided to put on hold, it's now listed there as a held check. Anytime you put a check on hold, when you go to your file menu and choose print pending checks, any checks you have on hold will not be an option that you can print. So there's no way for me to accidentally cut that check if I don't intend to do so today. And of course, we're going to see that funds transfer posted to the ledger, and then here's our outgoing wire. So at this point, if I've automatically transferred everything I know I'm going to transfer, that's the only wire I know that I'm sending out. My deposits are correct. Now I just need to print my checks. So my disbursement process just got a whole lot quicker by setting that stuff up in ProForm. Now, even though I posted this as an outgoing wire here in ProTrust, once I export, if I change my mind and realize I can't send a wire to that lender, I have to send them a check, you can still change that wire transaction back to a pending check. So it doesn't matter that you set it up in ProForm specifically as a wire, you still have the ability to change it once you get here in ProTrust, so none of that changes. All right, so one of the great things about ProForm is our ability to create templates. So all of these things that I've been talking about, setting up disbursements, setting up certain flex checks, if these are things that you're going to be doing on a regular basis, you can have the information in a template. So the templates are what you use to start your ProForm files. Every time you create a ProForm file, you're always going to apply a template. So when I click on my new file icon and I look to the bottom of my new file dialog box, I'm going to see a path to my template. Most likely it's going to be your default template. So we have default templates for our HUD transactions, CDF transactions, and also our GFE type transactions. You have a separate default template for each of those. In addition to those default templates, we also have the ability to create our own custom templates. If you want to create a custom template, you're going to create it just like you do a ProForm file. The only thing you're going to do differently is you're going to change your radio button option from file to template. We're going to pick the settlement type based on whether we want to create a CDF template or a HUD template. And instead of putting in a file name, we're going to instead put in a template name. So you can call this template whatever you want. A good reason why you may want to create a custom template is think about a lender that you do a whole bunch of closings with. I bet you that lender has a lot of the same fees all the time. If you want to create a template for that lender, you could go ahead and do so. Or if you think about a subdivision, maybe there's a brand new subdivision and you've been contracted to do all of the closings for every lot that gets purchased, every new house that gets purchased. Chances are those lots all have very similar title information, title requirements, title exceptions. You can create a template for that. So anytime that you want to make an edit to any of your existing templates, so let's think about that default template. If I want to get into that template and make some changes because there's something that I find myself changing every single time I get into a ProForm file, something that's outdated, or maybe I realize that there are things that I'm constantly typing over and over in all of my ProForm files, and I just stop myself one day and say, how can I save myself time here? Go to your template, put the information there. The rule of thumb I like to follow, if something is the same at least 7 out of 10 times, might as well have it that way in the template, so you only have to worry about changing it or deleting it on those 2 or 3 times where that's not the case. So templates are there to save us time. If you're unsure of exactly where your default templates are stored, if you want to open them up and make changes, you can go to your tools menu here in ProForm, and then you can take a look at your preferences. The preferences screen is going to show you the path to where your templates are stored. So every time you create a new file and you select your file type, CD, GFE, or HUD, it's going to tell you this is where I'm going to pull the template from. So to update that template, I need to go to that location. We're going to open up a template the same way we open up a ProForm file. So I can click on my open icon. I just need to make sure I'm in the right place. So when I hit open, it takes me right to where all of my ProForm files are stored. My templates, though, according to that path, are saved in a different folder. All of my ProForm files are saved in my data folder. but my templates, according to the path I just saw, are saved in a folder called templates. So I need to find that folder. So I'm going to click here where it says server, and that's going to back me out of the data folder. And now I can see all of the other folders that live here in my SoftPro network. So my templates are stored in that templates folder. I'm going to double click to open that up. Right now, it looks like that folder is pretty much empty. I don't see any templates. Where are they? The reason I can't see anything is if I look down to my file type dropdown, it's set to only show me Proform files. Proform files and templates have different file extensions. So you need to make sure you're looking for the right file type in that dropdown in order for you to be able to see those templates. Proform files have an extension of .pfd, which stands for Proform Data. Templates have an extension of .pft for Proform Template. So if I just change that little drop down there to templates, all of a sudden all my templates appear. So I can open up my default template and make changes. I can open up one of my other existing custom templates and make changes to it. So let's open up the default. I'm going to double click to open that. Your templates are going to look exactly like your Proform files. The biggest difference is you're only going to put information that's consistent in a template. So you would never, for example, want to put in a settlement date. You know, that's always something that's going to change. But let's think about contacts that are the same. So for example, if I go to my settlement agent and underwriter screen, if I'm never moving offices, then I know my information is always going to be the same. That should be in my default template. If we move offices one day and that is now outdated, don't keep changing it in your Proform file. Stop yourself, open up your template, change it there. That's the last time you'll have to change it until you move again. Same with my underwriter. If I work with the exact same underwriter on every single transaction, I might as well have their name and address already saved in my template. Let's think about fees. So if I go to my CDF, what about the fees that we charge? We should be putting our fees in the additional title charges screen. If I charge the same closing fee, the same doc prep fee, I'm always collecting for a closing protection letter. I can have that information in my template. If for some reason on a transaction we decide to waive the closing fee, doesn't mean I can't delete it out of each of my Proform files. Doesn't mean I can't change the dollar amount. Maybe we're going to give someone a discount because they bring us a lot of business, but at least it's there in the template and you don't have to mess with it unless it's, you know, that 2 or 3 kind of weird transaction where that is actually going to change. So your templates are really here to save you time. So keeping up with your template maintenance, going into them and making corrections, making additions when you realize you're adding or changing something all the time is really, really helpful. So anytime I want to overlay a template, I know that when I create a brand new file, I get to choose which template I apply. So it's going to pull in the default template automatically, but if I want to change my template to one of the custom ones I've created, I can click on Browse. I'm going to browse to where my templates live, and then I can pick whichever template I want. But even after a file has been created, you can go back and overlay a template, or we can also do an overlay of Proform file to Proform file. So for example, maybe I create a brand new Proform file for a refinance transaction. So I create it with my default template, and then I start looking at the property info and the borrower name, and it looks pretty familiar to me. So I do a search in Proform, and I realize that 5 years ago, we did the purchase transaction on this property. So I know I have a Proform file out there with this borrower's information in it, with the title information, the property info, the legal description. All of that's not going to change, or it may change slightly, but most of it's probably going to be the same. So to quickly basically do a copy and paste of that information from the old Proform file to the new one, I can do what's called the overlay. So on your toolbar, you're going to find an overlay file or template icon. Also, if you go to your file menu, you have the option of overlay file or template here. So whichever route you go, it's going to take you out to where either your templates are stored or your Proform files. So if I want to overlay a different template, then I want to navigate to my templates folder. I want to make sure my file type dropdown is set to show me templates, and then I can double click on the template I want to overlay. Maybe it's a Proform file I'm looking to grab. So in that example I just described, I want to go find that old Proform file from 5 years ago. So I'm going to back out of my templates folder. I'm going to go into my data folder, and I'm going to make sure to change my dropdown to show me my Proform files. So now I can go grab one of those old files, if I know what the file number is, of course, you can type it into the file name field or you can scroll through the list. So I'll go ahead and grab this one and then I'm going to click on open. So another kind of tip and trick that I love to use is this overlay tab selection. So this is something that can be turned on in your preferences screen if you're in SoftPro Standard. If you are in SoftPro Enterprise, it can be turned on in the admin part. So it's called SP admin where it can be turned on. But this overlay tab selection gives me a little bit more control. With that turned off, every single field on every single screen, all the information from the old file here to the new one is going to automatically overlay. It's going to move into the file. But if I turn on this overlay tab selection, stumbling over my words, overlay tab selection, then I have a little bit more control and I can pick and choose what information that I want. So if we think about that example, so we did a purchase transaction 5 years ago. Now we're going to do a refinance transaction. The property information is going to be the same. The borrower information is the same. So a lot of the stuff under my general tab, I probably want to go ahead and keep that. If I use order tracking, there may be some tasking that I want to pull in. If you don't use order tracking, that will be grayed out for you. Then let's think about what's in the title insurance tab, those requirements and exceptions. Those are probably going to be the same. Maybe there's some new ones I have to add, but at least everything from 5 years ago probably still applies. So I want to pull in that information. But what about that old CD information? None of that's going to be the same anymore. Maybe it's a different lender. It's obviously a different kind of transaction. There's going to be no seller fees. So if I don't want to pull in all of that old CD information, I can uncheck that CDF tab. So all I can pull in is just my general info and my title insurance info. And then when I click OK, it's going to go ahead and overlay that information into the file. So it's a really great way to quickly make a copy of a file. It's a great way to move information from one file to the other. And when you turn on that overlay tab selection, you get that added control. So for those of us in Enterprise, when you go to your tools menu and go to preferences, you can see your overlay tab selection checkbox, but it's grayed out. So your admin will need to go into SP admin to your user preferences and turn it on there for you. Those of us in standard, you will find the overlay tab selection checkbox is right there on your preferences screen. You can turn it on right here from Proform. You don't need to access admin to turn that on. And it's something that I always turn on. I love to have it because I just want that added piece of control when I'm doing an overlay. Now, another reason we may need to do an overlay is for that pesky situation when we need to convert a CD to a HUD or a HUD to a CDF. So we get this question a lot. Is there a way to change a file if it starts out as a cash transaction? Let's say we create a file that's a HUD, then we find out halfway through, nope, they're going to bring in a lender, and now we need to do a CD. So the way that we can easily do this is by using that overlay feature. You will need to create a brand new Proform file. There is no magic button we can hit that is going to convert a HUD file to a CDF or a CDF back to a HUD. So no way for us to magically do that. It would be great if we could, but we can't. So we will need to create a brand new Proform file. So I'm going to go ahead and close my HUD file, and I'm going to close that CDF file we were working on too. So I will need to go up to my new file icon, create a brand new file. So if I'm converting from HUD to CDF, of course, you want to make sure you create the right file types and make sure it says CDF there. And you're going to have to give the file a new name. So the other biggest question that we always get is, I need to use that same file number. How do I do that? I can't add another letter. I can't add another number to it. I have to use that exact same file number. So without deleting that file, yes, you will need to use a different file name. If you're using file numbers, you have to slightly change that, even if it's by adding the letter A at the end of it. Maybe you want to add the letter CDF at the end of it so you know which one was the HUD version, which one was the CDF version of that file number. But you have to change the file number at least slightly in order for you to create it. We aren't able to reuse a file number. So what a lot of our users try to do is they go into their data folder or wherever their SoftPro files are stored. They find that old file that they want to get rid of. They right click on it and they click delete. Or they highlight it and click on their delete button on their keyboard. It looks like the file disappeared. It looks like it's been deleted. So you try to reuse that file number. and it tells you that you can't because that file exists in the database already. So right-clicking and deleting or hitting that delete key does not actually delete the file from your Proform SoftPro database. It is still there, even though you can't see it. There is a way that we can properly delete a file though. So this here was my HUD file. If I want to get rid of that so that I can use that file number over again, exactly as it is, I need to properly delete it. Before I delete it, I'm going to make a copy of it because I want to still be able to use that overlay. I want to be able to recover that information that I've already put into that HUD file and move it into the CDF file. Remember, your general tab, your order tracking tab, your title insurance tab are the same in both file types. So that information can be overlaid from one type to another. So you can do HUD to CDF or CDF to HUD. The only information you're going to lose as part of that overlay is anything you had already put into your HUD tab. The HUD tab is totally different than the CDF tab, so anything on my HUD is not going to automatically populate onto my CD. I will need to redo that information, but at least I can recover the general and the title insurance info. So I want to make a backup copy of this because I am going to delete it, but I still want to use the overlay. So I'm going to right-click on my file number, and I'm going to choose to copy. And then I'm going to close out of there, and I'm just going to throw the copy on my desktop. So I'm going to right click and paste. Why isn't my paste an option? Let me go back and do that again. Copy. Paste. There we go. Must not have took the first time. Okay, so there is my Proform file. That's my backup copy of it. So now I'm going to go back into Proform. You need to make sure that you have all Proform files closed. Nothing can be open in Proform at all. You should see your just blank blue screen there. Then you're going to go up to your Tools menu, and the first option you have is Delete Files. This option is only available when you have nothing open. As soon as I open up a Proform file, and then I go back to that Tools menu, delete is not there. It's not an option. So that's why we need to make sure that all of our files are closed so that we have the option to delete files. So it's going to open up a search screen very similar to the regular search screen we see in Proform, and you're just going to do a search for the file that you're looking to delete. So I know my file number ended in 39, so I'm going to do *39 and then click search. And it was this one here. So if that's the file I want to delete, I'm going to highlight it and I'm going to click delete. It's asking me if I have a backup, which we do because we've got it on our desktop. So I'm going to say yes. I don't need any reports out of it. So I'm going to say yes. Are you sure? Yes. So now I'm just going to click OK. That is the proper way to delete your file. Now that I've gone through that process of deleting that file, I can recreate using the exact same file number. So I can go up to my new file dialog box. I'm going to make my file number exactly the same as it was before. I'm going to make sure to create it as a CDF this time because remember we're converting from HUD to CDF. And I'm going to click OK, and it's going to create. And I'm pulling in my default CDF template, by the way, because I want to pull in all that default CDF information. All right, let's try opening that again. Being a little bit slow today. There we go. All right, so I've now created this order as a CDF. Right now, if I open up my Express order entry screen, it's pretty much just a blank file. The only thing that I've applied so far is that default CDF template. So all I see is my default information. But if I want to pull in that information from that old HUD file that I deleted, remember we put a backup copy of it on our desktop. So at this point, I can go to my overlay icon and I want to browse out to my desktop. You want to make sure to change your file type dropdown to show you your Proform files, otherwise you're not going to find it. So here is that Proform file. I'm going to highlight it and click open. I'm going to pull in all the information. And I'm going to give it a second to do the overlay. And then now when I open up that Express order entry screen, for example, all that basic information came right here into that HUD file. So I don't have to retype any of that. Of course, I can change or adjust whatever is going to be different, but I don't need to rekey all of that information. So this is your best bet. This is the process you should use anytime you need to convert or change a file from a HUD to a CDF or a CDF to a HUD. If you need to use the exact same file number, you'll want to make a copy of that file, throw it on your desktop, and then go through that delete process to properly delete the one you don't need so that you're able to use that file number over again. All right, so another feature that I really love that I wanted to point out just to make sure everyone is aware of it is your file attachments. So if you are on one of our more later versions of SoftPro Standard and Enterprise, if your screen looks like mine, you've got a blue background and you have the updated kind of brighter icons, then you are on our latest versions. If you still have that kind of grayish, brownish color backgrounds, you are on one of the older versions. So you can actually do an upgrade to this latest, greatest version. And one of the added benefits you get from that upgrade is going to be what's called your file attachments. So when you do that upgrade, on your toolbar here, you're going to have an icon that looks like the top of a copier or a scanner, and that's going to be your file attachments. This is the place where I can attach any kind of document that I want to this Proform file. So let's, for example, think about one of our ready docs. So let's think about our CDF, for example. I'm going to go back and open up that CDF file where we actually have a CDF that's complete. So if I want to print out a copy of that CD, but I also want a PDF version of it that I can then email to, say, my lender, I can actually take that CDF, convert it to a PDF, and put it into my attachments all in one step. So to do that, I'm going to go to my File menu, and I'm going to choose Print to Attachments. This is going to open up that Ready Doc selection window, the same one we're used to seeing anytime we print to our actual printer. So I'm going to move through my document tree, and I'm going to find the CDF. So let's say that I just want to send over pages 2 and 3 and page 5 to my lender. That's the only ones they want to see. So I'm going to do CDF page 2, page 3, and then page 5. So this is going to get put into my attachments. Down here in the bottom right-hand corner, I'm going to give or need to give this document a name. So whatever you want to see it called in your attachments, that's what you're going to type there. So maybe this is my preliminary CDF. It's not quite done yet. We're not ready for closing. So I'm going to call it my prelim CDF, and then I'm going to click OK. And it's going to put a copy of that document into my attachments. Ignore those print job things. My printer isn't hooked up correctly, but that has nothing to do with my attachments. Okay, so here is that document. It's now been added to my attachments. If I want to see it, then I just click on that attachments icon, and there's my preliminary CDF. So any of your ready docs that you produce, so think about your CDs, your HUDs, your title commitments, your title policies, all of that can be added directly into your attachments. They do add as PDF documents. So if you choose to view it, so if you highlight that document and click on view, it will open up in Adobe as a PDF document. Also, if you're using SoftPro 360, if you go through any type of transaction that produces a document at the end. So for example, when we go out to our underwriter websites to create closing protection letters and policy jackets, once you accept that transaction through SoftPro 360, a copy of that document that was produced automatically goes into your attachments. So your CPLs will automatically go to the file attachment. Your policy jackets, you can view and print them right from attachments. In addition to your ready docs and anything that you generate through SoftPro 360, you can also pull in outside documents. Maybe I have something on my computer saved in a network location. Maybe it's saved on my desktop. Maybe it's something that someone emailed to me. You can actually add it to the Proform file as an attachment. So to browse my computer, I can open up my attachments and I can click on the Attach button. That allows me to browse wherever I want to go to find a document and pull it in. Now, these documents can be anything. They could be PDF documents, they could be Word documents, it could be an Excel spreadsheet, it could be a copy of an email. So I'm going to go into this attachments folder. Maybe I want to pull in a copy of this deed here. So I'm going to double click on my deed. It's going to ask me what do I want to call it. So whatever I want to see listed there in the attachments, I'll just go ahead and call it deed, and then I'll click OK. I can also add documents to the attachments without even having that attachment window open. You can do a drag and drop of documents. So I can drag and drop something directly into Proform and it will get added into those file attachments. So this is a great feature, especially if you're someone that works on more than one screen. Think about having your email up on one side, your Proform on the other. You see a very important email come in about the file that you're working on. If you want to pull a copy of that email right into your file, you can certainly do that. Even if you just work on one screen, we don't have two screens that I can kind of drag and drop from. You can just make Proform a little bit smaller, so you can minimize it a little bit to make it smaller on your screen. If you hit your Windows key and then your right arrow key, it'll kind of snap it to the right, so you have access either to your desktop or to another application. So let's say I want to pull in something from my desktop. Let's say this title commitment. If I hold down my left mouse and drag it anywhere in that white space within the Proform file, once I release, it gets added as an attachment. If I open up my email, let's say, and I'm going to move that over to the left. Maybe I want to drag something from my email right into Proform. So if I grab an email, hold down my left mouse, and drag that anywhere in my white space, once I release, a copy of that document is going to get automatically attached. So to see those attachments, I'm going to go and click on that attachments icon again. So here's the title commitment, and then here's a copy of that email. Now, maybe the subject of that email line, or maybe the subject line of that email doesn't really describe what important information is in the email. So maybe we started talking about one transaction and we just used that email chain. Maybe it was me and my realtor, and they sent me something that applies to a different transaction, but the subject still references a different property. If I pull that email in and I want to change the description so that I know what that's for, you can highlight and you can click on edit, and it'll allow you to change the title or the description of that. So maybe this was disbursement instructions for my selling agent's commission. So I can change that title so I know why the heck I pulled an email referencing a different property into this particular file. So file attachments you can think of as your virtual file folder. Anything you would have in your paper file you can add here as an attachment to keep everything together. So it's forever going to be attached here to the Proform file. You can delete your attachments once added if you need to. The other great thing about attachments is this can be linked up to your email. So especially for any of you that are Outlook users, you can then email these documents to your file contacts. So for example, if I want to send this commitment out to, let's say, my lender, I'm going to highlight my commitment, and then I'm going to click email. It's going to show me a list of all of the file contacts that I've entered email addresses for. So I see my settlement agent in the list, lender, listing, selling agent, and my buyer. I don't see my seller though, so why don't I see a seller? The reason I wouldn't see a seller in the list is for one of two reasons. One, I don't have a seller in this file. Maybe it's a refinance. Maybe I haven't entered the seller yet. Or two, you did enter a seller, you just did not enter an email address for that seller. If you see who you want to send the email to, so let's say we want to send this to our lender, that is the contact we need to send the email to. I can use the checkbox to pick one person, or I can pick multiple people. Maybe I also want to copy the buyer. And then when I click OK, it's going to automatically create an Outlook email message for me with the document attached, and it's addressed to those people that I chose. So now I can do whatever I normally do with an email. I can add additional documents as attachments, put in my subject, add additional recipients, type in my message. The other good thing about email, let's do that again. So let's do our title commitment and let's click on email. Maybe this was an email I did need to send to my seller, and my seller's not in the list. That's okay. I don't have to go back into Proform and then add their email address into the Proform file. Maybe that seller is a really good client of ours and we do tons of work with them and I'm emailing them constantly all the time. I know their email off by heart. So you can actually pick nobody and then click OK. It still creates the Outlook message for you. So you can go ahead and pull in that address either from your Outlook address book or you can hand type it in. All right, guys, that is the information I have for you on tips and tricks. Hopefully that was helpful. Hopefully there was something in there that you didn't know you could do before that's going to make your jobs easier. So Leslie, I will turn it over to you to see if there were any questions that came through.
There was a few I was able to answer, but this one I think several people might want to know, and it is, if you need to transfer funds to multiple ledgers from the same file, can you specify multiple ledgers when you export?
No, so you would have, well, you'd have to split the funds into separate funds transfers. So if I say have $1,000 disbursement in my Proform file, and that $1,000 needs to be transferred into 3 separate ledgers, you could use your flex checks to break that down into 3 disbursements so you could transfer to 3 separate places.
Okay. The next question is, how do I have a standard fee in my template go to a separate check?
What you could do is I would, in that case, if you don't want it to be lumped together with anything else, I would not put it in the additional title charges screen. I'd put it directly on CDF page 2 so that you have control over the disbursement status code. Kind of the negative thing, I want to say negative, but the not so flexible thing about templates and that additional title charges screen is that you don't have control over where those are going to go into the CD because our CD sections alphabetize themselves automatically. So we don't necessarily know exactly which line one disbursement's always going to show on. It could always be different. So if you have something that you need to separate from anything else, I would not put it in the additional title charges screen. I'd put it directly on CDF page 2 in whatever section you want to see it on. And then you can make it that letter S for separate check so it doesn't group together with any of your other settlement agent fees. And it'll alphabetize itself automatically, you know, based on all the other stuff you have in that file.
Okay, great. Let's see. The next one is there a maximum amount of documents you can keep in the attachments?
No, not that I know of.
Okay, yeah, I think that would actually probably be more on your, how you store your data at your end, but I don't, from our end, we don't have a limitation.
Yeah,
okay,
so that will all dependent on your server space, wherever you have SoftPro stored. I mean, it will be on that same server. So depending on what your storage space is like, that would be on your office.
Okay. And then it looks like we have one that says, is Proform working on letting us select more than one file from the attachments into an email?
You know, I haven't heard anything on that. I know that that is something that is on the list because that was definitely a request from a lot of different customers. So I don't know what the status is on that right now, but I know that it's on the list of things to be worked out.
Yeah, I actually have heard the same thing, but I don't know any more specifics on that. So let's see, this one says, how do you delete Proform generated income?
When you're in ProTrust, you can, let me go back to that ProTrust real quick. Oh, I got logged out. Let me log back in. So when you're in your ProTrust ledger, if you want to delete that Proform generated deposit and just kind of start from scratch, you can highlight it and then there is a delete transaction icon. So if you're in this most recent version, it's going to be right above your transaction list. It's that red circle with the minus inside of it. If you're on our older version, the one that doesn't have the blue background, it's that grayish brownish color, then your delete transaction icon is going to be on your toolbar. I think it's the very last one. So that's how you can delete that deposit.
Okay, and then I think this will be the last one. We have a question that says, do I have to put a .pdf after I enter my file number?
No, but when you're creating your templates, you should put in the .pft. So if I create a template, you can see how your Proform file is going to automatically do it. Even if you don't see it, when you create a proform file, that extension automatically gets put in of PFD. Now, when I do a template, I do want to manually add the .pft. It's still going to create the template if you don't. It's still going to work the same way. However, it's going to be harder to find. So if I do a template, I'm trying to think of a random name here or something I haven't already used. I'm just going to do a Jessica template. Why not? If I just add it as Jessica and then click OK, it's still going to create that template. I'm still able to use it. I'm still able to add and make changes to any information in that template. But when I go back to look for it, I'll show you what happens. It's a little bit harder to find. All right, so I create that template. I get it all set up. And then a couple weeks down the road, I decide there's one other thing that I want to change or add in that template. So I'm going to browse out and go try and find that. So I'm going to click on open. I know that my templates get stored in my templates folder. So I back out of data. I go into templates. I change my file type dropdown to show me those templates. And that Jessica template is nowhere to be found. And I think to myself, oh my God, what happened to that? I spent 3 hours building that last week. Where did it go? It's here. It just doesn't have that extension, so you're not seeing it. If you change your dropdown to all files, there it is. So at this point, you can right click and add the extension if you want to have it show up with all of the other template files, or you could leave it the way it is. It's really up to you. So it's not that it won't create and it won't work. It just is harder to find. That's all. So, but I can right click and rename, and then I can add that .pft.
Okay, great. Let's see. I think if we have time, we did get another one come in, and it says, so as long as the right template when I generate a new file with information from the template, I'll answer that. Yes, she just went over that. So when you pull in the correct, either your default template or whatever template you're pulling in, it'll populate that information that you stored in there, and it'll generate the file with the PFD number for you. And then let's see, the last one here says, can you delete all the items in ProTrust at once, or do you have to delete them one by one?
I think you can. Let me go back. I think you can hold down your control key and highlight. Oh, no, I guess you can't. I never actually tried that. That's a good question. No, I think you have to delete them one at a time, because if you hold down your control key, it doesn't let you highlight more than one thing. So yeah, you're going to have to delete them individually one at a time.
Yeah, and I think that's just a precautionary measure because you're in your accounting portion, and just to make sure that you're not randomly grouping in something that shouldn't be there. So the answer to that question right now would be no, you have to do it individually. Okay, well, with that, I think we are gonna end today's session. That was really great. Thank you so much, Jessica. We really appreciate it. We had some good questions, and hopefully everybody learned a little bit. If you have any follow-up questions or comments, please feel free to reach out and email me directly, or you can email Jessica as well. But my email is leslie.wyatt@softprocorp.com. And again, if I can't get you the answer, I will certainly find someone that can. So with that, I hope everybody has a happy holiday and a very, very happy, healthy new year. I think everybody is looking forward to 2021, and hopefully a little bit better and brighter than 2020, but we will be taking a break from our Saved You a Seat over the holidays, and Ellen Crummell with SoftPro will be sending out the next one and date, and so hopefully you can join us for that. So thank you again to Jessica. Thank you for Ellen for everything you do for all of these behind the scenes Save You a Seat webinars, and thank you for everyone for joining us for all of them through the year, and we look forward to next year. Happy holidays, everyone.
Thank you.